The day they took the house, Brennan Weston was sitting at the same kitchen table where she had paid 9 years of utility bills. Same chair. Same window behind her, the one that faced the backyard where her father used to mow on Sunday mornings. Same afternoon light coming through at the same angle it always had, warm and familiar and completely indifferent to what was happening underneath it. Soren placed the folder on the table. He opened it the way a man opens something he has already decided you cannot argue with. Inside was a document from the Tennessee Department of Health. A birth record. And beneath it, an adoption filing dated 1984. He began to explain. And Brennan sat there and listened, and watched something happen to a word she had carried her whole life without it ever once feeling dangerous. Adopted. Her parents had told her when she was 8 years old. Sitting in this same kitchen, with this same light coming through this same window. Her mother had held both her hands across the table and said it the way you say something you want a child to receive as a gift, not a wound. You were chosen, baby. We wanted you so much we went and found you specifically. Brennan had gone back outside and played in the yard afterward. It had not changed a single thing about who she was or where she belonged. Until right now. Because Soren was using that word, her parents' word, their gift to her, as a legal instrument. He was turning it in his hands like a key. And the door it was opening was the one that led out of this house and away from everything she had given the last 9 years of her life to hold together. Under the estate documents as currently structured, your claim to the property isn't equivalent to ours. Brennan looked at her brother. Then at Della, who was looking at the table. Then at Phelan, 19 years old, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the wall behind Brennan's head, who looked like he had swallowed something that was making him sick from the inside. She asked one question. Is this what you all want? Nobody answered that question directly. Nobody ever does, when the answer is yes and they know what yes makes them. They gave her 30 days. She was gone in 9. The people who hurt you the most are usually the ones who watched you sacrifice everything first. Remember that. Because everything that follows, every decision Brennan made, every door she walked through, everything she built, began at that kitchen table, with the people she had given her 20s to, using her parents' love as a weapon against her. To understand what they took, you need to understand what she gave. Their parents died on a Tuesday night in November. A semi-truck ran a red light on a wet Memphis road and that was it, no warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call at 11:47 p.m. that split Brennan's life permanently in two before and after. Phelan was 14. Della was 20. Soren was 24 and already living across town, already certain he was the most important person in any room he entered. Brennan was 22. And she was the one who came home. She didn't announce it. She didn't gather everyone and explain her decision with tears and speeches. She called the University of Tennessee the next morning, deferred her scholarship, and started learning what it meant to run a house on nothing. The scholarship was in architecture. Full for years. Fully funded. She had worked for it since she was 14, staying after school, submitting her portfolio until it was right, waiting by the mailbox with the specific anxiety of someone who understood that certain doors did not open unless you found the exact right key. She had wanted, with great precision, to design buildings that felt like they belonged to the people inside them. She put the letter in a drawer. She told herself she'd go back when things settled. Things never settled. She worked the opening shift at a diner called Clover on Summer Avenue for days a week and the closing shift 2 others. On Saturdays she cleaned offices for a property management company, moving through empty floors with a mop cart, learning without meaning to which buildings were maintained with pride and which ones were quietly falling apart. She came home every evening to make sure Phelan had eaten. She checked his homework at the kitchen table while the late news played low in the other room. She braided Della's hair on Sunday mornings, neither of them talking much, the silence between them carrying the weight of two people missing the same person in different ways. Soren came by on holidays, mostly. He had his own life, his own apartment, his own set of reasons why things were complicated right now. Della stayed 2 years, then moved to Nashville. Brennan helped her pack her boxes. She stood on the front porch and watched Ella's car disappear around the corner, then went inside and washed the dishes. Failing graduated high school in the spring of 2013. Brennan sat in the gymnasium bleachers in a second-hand dress and watched him walk across that stage, her brother, who had been 14 and shaking at the graveside, crossing a stage with his shoulders back, and felt something release in her chest that she hadn't known she was holding. She had done all of it. Every morning and every closing shift and every utility bill and every homework check and every Sunday braid and every year of it. Quietly. Without asking anyone to notice. She was 30 years old. She thought the hard part was behind her. She was wrong. It started with Soren mentioning a name. Aldous Greer. A family attorney, a friend of a colleague, someone who helped families get estates properly organized. Soren brought it up over a Sunday dinner in the way that things already decided in advance are presented as spontaneous. Loose ends, he said. The will was never updated. It makes sense to sort it properly. Brennan agreed. She had nothing to hide and nothing to fear. She trusted her siblings the way you trust people you grew up with, not because you have tested that trust, but because it has never occurred to you that you need to. That trust was the door. Soren walked straight through it. She signed the documents Aldous Greer prepared without reading every page. She was working doubles that week. She was tired in the accumulated way of someone who has been tired for 9 years without a real break. The papers were placed in front of her and she signed where the tabs indicated. She didn't know what she had signed away. She would not know for another 10 years. 9 days after the kitchen table, Brennan left Memphis with $800, a duffel bag, her mother's recipe box, and a folder of documents she picked up on her way out, not strategically, just instinctively, the way you grab something when part of you knows it might matter later. She didn't call a lawyer. She had $800 and no time, and these were the people she had given 9 years of her life to, and she could not make herself fight them in a courtroom. Fighting them would have required her to hate them. She wasn't ready for that. So she left, which she would later understand was the one decision she didn't have to make the way she made it. But she made it. It was made. She got on a bus headed southwest and did not look back at Memphis until the city had completely disappeared behind the flat winter fields of West Tennessee. Austin was not a plan. It was where the bus went. She found a room for $420 a month on the east side. She got a job at a property management company answering phones and filing paperwork. She wore her good blouse, showed up 10 minutes early every day, and watched. That was the thing nobody in that office understood about Brennan Weston. She was always watching. She watched which properties turned over fastest and why. She watched which landlords priced themselves out of good tenants. She watched the east side of Austin, which in 2014 was beginning a shift that people who had been there long enough could feel coming the way you feel weather before it arrives. Land was still cheap. The tech corridor was moving east. The city's affordable housing gap was widening every month. The broker she worked under was a man named Otis Pruitt. 63 years old. In Austin real estate since before it was fashionable. Not soft, he had the directness of someone who had watched too many people waste time being diplomatic when they could have been useful, but honest, which Brennan had learned was rarer and worth considerably more. He noticed her questions. He started giving them real answers. One afternoon he dropped a listing file on her desk without explanation. "Tell me what you think is wrong with the asking price." She told him. In specific terms. With comparable sales she had pulled on her lunch break, annotated in the margins. He read her note slowly. He looked at her over his glasses. "Why are you answering phones?" She had her real estate license within 5 months. Otis split her first commission with her because she had sourced the client, negotiated the contract, and managed the closing without being asked to do any of it. He didn't owe her that split. He gave it anyway. That was the first real thing that went right. 14 months into her license, Brennan sourced a small development opportunity on the Eastern Corridor. 12 units. Affordable housing. A city grant available if the financing structure held. She had put the deal together herself, stayed up until 2 a.m. for 3 weeks getting every number right, found a financing partner through Otis's network, submitted the application. 2 weeks before approval, the financing partner pulled out. No warning. No negotiation. A single email on a Thursday afternoon saying the firm was restructuring its community lending portfolio and would not be proceeding. She had 72 hours before the city contract window closed. She did not panic. She sat at her desk and pulled up every contact she had made in 14 months in this city, and she started making calls. 12 calls in 2 days. 7 didn't answer. 3 said no immediately. 1 said maybe, and she said she needed a yes by Friday morning. The 12th call was to a woman she had met once at a city planning forum, a development finance specialist named Weston Asante who had given Brennan her card and said, "Call me if you find something worth building." Brennan called. Imani answered. She asked 2 questions, listened to Brennan's answers, and said, "Send me the file tonight. I'll read it in the morning." By Friday at 9 a.m., the financing was rebuilt. The contract window held. The project moved forward. Standing outside the city planning office after the paperwork was filed, Brennan understood something she would carry for the rest of her career. The moment everything falls apart is exactly when you find out whether you actually built something or just arranged something. She had built something. It held. Weston Asante Development Group was incorporated 8 months after that phone call. The first project came in under budget and ahead of schedule. The city noticed. The second project was larger. The third larger still. Then, in year 3, when the company was growing faster than either of them had planned and the Austin development world was beginning to pay attention, someone decided to make that attention a problem. His name was Fletcher Dowd, a senior partner at an established Austin development firm that had watched 2 women claim 3 city contracts in 18 months and had apparently decided that the cleanest way to slow them down was to question whether they belonged at the table at all. He said it at a city council housing forum. Not directly, men like Fletcher Dowd were rarely direct. He said it the way these things are always said, wrapped in the language of professional concern. Questions about experience. Questions about institutional backing. Questions about whether certain newer firms had the depth to handle the scale they were pursuing. Everyone in that room understood exactly what he meant. Some of them nodded. Brennan was in the room. She heard every word. She did not respond at the podium. She did not call a press contact. She did not send a letter. She went back to her office, sat at her desk, and looked at the 2 projects currently under construction and the third in final planning, all of them on time, all of them within budget, all of them already changing the lives of people the market had long since stopped considering. She let the work answer. 6 months later, the city awarded Weston Asante their largest contract to date, a 200-unit workforce housing development on the South Corridor. Fletcher Dowd's firm had also bid. They came in second. He never raised the question of her legitimacy again. Some battles, Brennan had learned, were not won by fighting. They were won by building something so undeniable that the person who doubted you had to watch it standing there, finished and real, every single day. By year 5, they had 38 employees. By year 8, they were being written about in the Austin Business Journal, 2 women reshaping how this city thinks about who deserves to live near its center. Brennan gave one interview. She talked about financing structures and community land trusts and the gap between what cities say they want and what they actually fund. She said nothing about Memphis. Nothing about a kitchen table or a manila folder or a Tuesday night phone call that had split her life in 2. She was precise and composed, and the journalist noted in the piece that she had a way of answering questions that made you feel the question had been slightly improved in the answering. She didn't read the piece when it ran. She was on a site visit. 9 years in, her Memphis attorney, a woman named Bryn Castillo, called about an unrelated matter and mentioned she had been reviewing some background documents Brennan had sent over and noticed something worth discussing. She asked if Brennan had ever consulted a lawyer about the estate situation. Brennan said no. Bryn was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, she said that under Tennessee Code annotated Section 31-2-103, an adopted child carries identical inheritance rights to a biological child. That the documents Aldous Greer had prepared, which Brennan had signed at that kitchen table while she was tired and trusting and completely unaware, had been structured in a way that a competent estate attorney would recognize as, at minimum, deliberately misleading. Brennan had standing. She'd had standing all along. She sat with that for 11 days. Kept going to work. Kept showing up. Had dinner with Imani on a Thursday and said nothing about any of it. On the 12th day she put it in a drawer. She had $340 million and 41 employees and a company that was changing the way a major American city thought about who deserved shelter. She was not going to spend what she had built on people who had already decided what she was worth. But she knew. And knowing changed something, quietly, permanently, the way true things do, whether you act on them or not. The text came on a Tuesday evening in September. She was in her car outside a financing meeting that had run an hour over. She picked up her phone to check a message from Imani and saw the notification. Unknown number. Hey Bren. It's far. I know it's been a long time and I know I don't have any right to text you like this. Mom and Dad's 30th anniversary would have been this Saturday. Soren and Della are doing something at the house. I think you should know. I think you should come, if you want to. I understand if you don't. I just wanted you to know. She read it twice. Then she set the phone face down on the passenger seat and sat in that parking lot while the Austin sun finished going down and the structure lights came on one section at a time. I think you should come, if you want to. Not an apology. Not a reckoning. Just her youngest brother, who had been 19 and silent at the end of a table, jaw tight, eyes on the wall, sending a text on a Tuesday evening because something in him had refused, finally, to let the silence become permanent. She thought about what it would mean to go. About walking back into that house. About what Soren's face would do. About Della's careful eyes. About the kitchen where she had stood in her funeral dress washing dishes, making a decision she never announced to anyone, beginning the chapter that had cost her everything she had originally planned her life to be. She thought about what it would mean not to go. She had spent 10 years building a life that owed nothing to that kitchen table. She had built it cleanly, completely, with her whole self, for herself, which was the one thing she had never been permitted to do before. But she was human. And there was something unfinished sitting in Memphis that $340 million had not touched. She picked up her phone. She booked a first-class ticket. 2 days before Saturday, Soren was alone in the living room when his phone lit up with a news alert. He had been searching her name. He wouldn't admit later exactly when he had started, only that something Phelan said a few weeks ago had made him type it into a search bar late one night, half expecting nothing. He found the Austin Business Journal piece first. Then the National Housing feature. Then the Forbes mention. Then the number. He read it once and thought he had misread it. He read it again, slower, his thumb pressing the screen like the pressure might change what the digits said. $340 million. He set the phone down on the coffee table. He picked it up again. He looked at the number a third time, and something moved through his chest that was not pride and not quite shame, but something that lived in the territory between them, something that had no comfortable name. He thought about the folder he had placed on that kitchen table. The tabs she had signed without reading. The careful language Aldous Greer had used. The version of the story he had told himself, practical, necessary, the right thing for everyone, that he had been maintaining for 10 years like a structure he knew was unsound but had kept living in anyway. He put the phone face down on the table. He sat in the living room of the house Brennan had kept alive with 9 years of double shifts, and he did not move for a long time. She drove a rental car to the house. Dark sedan, mid-range, nothing that announced itself. She wore a coat she'd had for 3 years that fit her well and said nothing about money except by the quality of its silence. She was not going back to perform anything. She was going back to be present. To stand in that room. to let them see, clearly, without explanation, who they had thrown out into the cold. She sat outside for 5 minutes. The maple tree her father had planted the year she turned 7 was now taller than the roofline, branches reaching over the porch like the tree had been growing toward something it intended to shelter. She sat and looked at it. Then she got out of the car. Phelan opened the door before she reached the porch steps. 29 now. Their father's way of standing, weight slightly back, like he was always about to sit down and think carefully about something. He looked at her the way people look at something they have been dreading and hoping for simultaneously, both feelings so tangled together they make a single expression with no good name. He said her name. She said his. He stepped back and let her in. There were no words for 10 years in a doorway, and he seemed to understand that. Soren came around from the kitchen and stopped. He had aged in the way that men who spend their 30s being certain about things age when the certainty stops paying, heavier, less settled behind the eyes. 43. He looked it in a way that surprised her. He said her name like a question. She said his like a statement. You look well, he said. I am, she said. The silence that followed held everything they were not going to say in this room, on this particular Saturday. She watched his face, the careful, controlled effort of a man who had been sitting with a number for 48 hours and was now standing 3 feet from the person that number belonged to. He was trying to find the right expression for what he was feeling. There was no right expression. He settled for careful. Della came in from the hallway, stopped when she saw Brennan, and did something complicated with her face that moved through surprise and guilt and something close to relief before settling into a careful, pained smile. There were children. Soren's too, running between rooms with the physical commitment of children who haven't yet learned that adults prefer stillness. Della's daughter, 7 years old, serious-eyed, watching Brennan from behind her mother's leg with the attention of a child who senses something important is happening without knowing what it is. Brennan looked at those children and felt something move through her that had no clean name. They hadn't done anything. They had simply been born into this. They ate. Catered food, good wine, music low from a speaker. For stretches of the evening it almost felt like what it was supposed to be, a family marking an anniversary, people who shared a history sitting together in the house where that history began. But Soren watched her across the table with the sideways attention of someone recalibrating every assumption in real time, trying not to be seen doing it. He was careful with his words in a way he had never been before. He refilled her wine glass without being asked. He laughed at the right moments. He was performing ease so deliberately that the effort was visible to anyone looking for it. She was looking for it. She said nothing about Austin. She talked about the maple tree. She asked Phelan about his teaching. She listened to Della describe her daughter's school play with genuine attention that seemed to catch Della off guard, as if she had prepared for coldness and was uncertain what to do with its absence. She was not performing warmth. She was simply present, which was harder than warmth and more powerful than coldness, and she had learned the difference the hard way. Della found her in the hallway near the family photographs, a cluster her parents had arranged on the wall over many years. School pictures. Holiday snapshots. A formal portrait from when the children were young. Brennan was in it. 7 years old. Standing beside her mother with her mother's hand on her shoulder, her own face turned slightly upward, serious, like she was listening to something just outside the frame. Della stood beside her and looked at the photograph. Brennan. Her voice had lost every professional layer. What was underneath was quieter. I need to say something. Brennan waited. I knew it didn't feel right, Della said. What Aldous told us? I had questions and I didn't ask them. I told myself it was Soren's decision. That the legal situation was complicated. That you'd be okay, because you were always okay. Because you always figured it out. She stopped. That was a lie I kept telling myself so I didn't have to tell the truth. Did it work? Brennan said quietly. Della looked at the photograph. No. The hallway held them both for a moment. I'm not going to tell you it's fine, Brennan said. Because it isn't. But I'm not going to stand here and be angry at you in front of their pictures either. A pause. What you did with it is yours to carry. I've been carrying my own things. I don't need yours too. She touched Ella's arm once, briefly, firmly, and walked back toward the living room. Soren found a moment alone with her near the end of the evening. He came to where she was standing by the back window, looking out at the dark yard, the garden beds her father used to tend, the old fence line barely visible in the November dark. He stood beside her and didn't speak immediately, which was unusual for Soren, who filled silences as a matter of reflex. I knew what I was doing, he said finally. Not I made a mistake. Not Aldous misled us. Just, I knew. His voice was low and flat, the way voices get when a man is done pretending. Not every detail. But the shape of it. I knew what we were taking from you and I built a version of it in my head that let me call it practical. Brennan looked at the dark yard. You gave up your scholarship, he said. You were here every single day for 9 years. A pause that cost him something. And I came for holidays. You know what that was, Brennan said simply. Yes. Then you know. Not forgiveness. Not condemnation. Just the truth, placed between them, allowed to remain without being softened or explained. He was quiet for a moment. Then, and this was the part she hadn't expected. I'm in trouble. Financially. Some investments went wrong. I'm not telling you so you'll fix it. I'm telling you because we're telling true things tonight. She studied his reflection in the dark window. There's a community development project I'm advising in Memphis, she said. South Corridor. Mixed income housing. They need someone who can manage stakeholder relationships, someone who knows how to walk into a room full of people who don't agree and bring them to a decision. She looked at him directly. You know how to do that, Soren. You always have. You just spent a long time using it for the wrong things. He said nothing. It's not forgiveness, she said. It's an opportunity. Those are different things, and I need you to understand I know the difference. He nodded, slowly, the nod of a man who understood he was being given something he had not earned yet and would have to earn going forward. Thank you, he said. The words cost him something. She could hear it. She turned back to the window. Outside, the maple branches moved in the cold November air, the last few leaves releasing into the dark. Phelan drove her to her hotel. They rode most of the way without talking, radio low, Memphis streets moving past the windows. She watched the city go by. The neighborhood she had grown up in. The road she had driven home on at 2 a.m. after closing shifts at Clover, the city dark and quiet and entirely hers. At a red light he said. I should have said something. That day at the table. I was right there and I knew it was wrong and I didn't say a word. You were 19, she said. I knew it was wrong, he said again. He needed her to hear that part specifically, not the excuse, the fact. Yes, she said. You did. She let that be true without softening it. He deserved the honest weight of it rather than the comfortable absolution he hadn't earned yet. But she also looked at him, her brother who had been 14 at the graveside, shaking through his whole body, who had found her number from somewhere and sent a text on a Tuesday evening because something in him had refused to let the silence become permanent. You found my number, she said. Took a while, he said. You're not easy to find. But you found it. Yeah. That matters, far. The light changed. He drove. After another block he said, Are you going to be okay? With all of it? She considered that question the way it deserved. I've been okay, she said. That's not really the question anymore. He glanced at her. The question now, she said, is what I build next. He pulled up outside the hotel. She got out, then turned back before closing the door. Keep in touch, she said. Not text. Call. He looked at her through the open door with their father's eyes. "Deal," he said. She closed the door. She watched his taillights disappear into the Memphis night. She stood outside the hotel for a moment before going in. The air was cold and clean, carrying something from the river if the wind was right. She breathed in once, slowly, and looked up at the orange city light pressing against the low clouds. She had walked out of this city with $800 and a duffel bag and no plan, and no one who knew where she was going, because she hadn't known either. She was walking back into it with $340 million, a company, 41 people whose livelihoods bore her name, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that she had built every part of it herself, without their help, without their blessing, and entirely without their belief in her. That was not revenge. It was something quieter than revenge and far more permanent. It was just the truth of what she was, which turned out to be considerably more than any of them had imagined, and exactly as much as she had always known. She flew back to Austin on Sunday morning. Imani called at noon. Site meeting Tuesday. Financing presentation Thursday. A new development on the east side that needed both of them fully present starting Monday. Brennan put her bag down. Made coffee. Sat at her desk. Outside, Austin was bright and loud and completely uninterested in what had just happened to her in Memphis, which was exactly right. Her life was here. The next thing she was going to build was already taking shape in her mind with the particular clarity that comes when you have finally set something down that you have been carrying for too long. She opened her laptop. She got to work. Phelan texted Monday evening. "It was really good to see you, Bren." "Really?" She looked at the message for a moment. Then she typed back. "You too. Call me sometime." 3 dots. Then. Deal. She set the phone down and turned back to her screen. There was a building going up on the south side of Austin. 200 units of workforce housing, the kind of project that put roofs over people the market had decided were not its problem. Her name was on the permit. Her vision was in every line of the blueprint. She had wanted, since she was a girl filling out scholarship applications in a Memphis library, to design buildings that felt like they belonged to the people inside them. They had taken the house she sacrificed everything to keep. So she spent the rest of her life building homes for people nobody else wanted to protect. The Memphis project moved forward. Soren showed up. Every day.